Alright guys, welcome back. This is Melanie here at Vision City Design Studio. I am so glad that you are back, and I'm really excited to talk to you about this specific clip that I'm going to be sharing with you from one of my courses, which is the Trade Show Success Guide course. For those of you who are maybe at that stage where you are starting to venture out into doing trade shows, or when I say trade shows, I mean really any kind of in-person event. So maybe it's the holiday markets or Mother's Day markets that are starting soon. I know the spring and summer markets that are starting to happen. I mean, I'm here in Toronto area, and it's finally warming up. So if you're somebody who lives in a warm area that's warm all year round, I am totally jealous of you. I used to live in California, so I know how that feels, and I absolutely miss that. But now here in Toronto area, it is slowly but surely turning a new leaf, and it's finally spring. So we are dancing in the streets around here. So happy. But with that comes the whole season of new trade shows for the year. And I find that this is really when a lot of trade shows, even in warmer places as well, this seems to be when the season for trade shows and farmers markets, any kind of, even Mother's Day markets and things like that. This is really when I find they begin to kick off. And so I thought that this would be a really fitting time to let you guys behind the curtain into one of my courses, which is the Trade Show Success Guide, where I actually am going to share with you about booth design. Now, booth design could refer to an actual booth that you're setting up at an event. Maybe you're setting up at a festival or any kind of live event. Maybe it's a 10 by 10 booth or a 5 by 10. Maybe you're setting up a table at a craft market. Oftentimes tables come in 8-foot length or 6-foot length. So I'm really talking in this specific video/audio, depending on how you're listening or watching this, about really how to use your space and how to be effective with the actual space that you're renting while you are doing these events. So I hope that you guys really find this helpful. I hope it encourages you, and maybe some of you are just kind of, toying with the idea of doing a live event coming up this summer or spring, and I want to encourage you that maybe this could be something that could be of benefit to your art business. I find sometimes being in person, it makes you as a brand and as a person, as an artist, more real to people. I know it sounds funny, but when you're online and you're just, we're doing things online, sometimes we don't really feel like real humans because people are seeing images or seeing maybe framed pictures or seeing different, representations of our art, but they're not always seeing us. And so when they get to actually meet us, shake our hands, have an interaction, maybe chat about something, buy art directly from you as an artist, there's something that really happens there. It's a really cool connection. And so I hope that this specific podcast is of real help to you guys. So let's go ahead and give it a listen, and I will see you at the end. Hey creatives, in this video I want to talk to you all about booth design when it comes to live events, trade shows, craft fairs, art markets, and so on. Now when I say booth design, that could also refer to just tabletop design. It could refer to a full booth, which is usually a 10 by 10 size. You could also do a half booth, which is about 5 by 10 depending on the event, and as well as a traditional either 8-foot or 6-foot wide table. A lot of times, depending on the size that you go with, it'll give you more or less options when it comes to design, obviously, because if you have more space, you can do more, right? But I want to talk to you in this video all about how important it is to really create a booth design that's going to draw people towards your booth to look at your products. Now, as I said before and earlier in this course, a lot of times when we actually are applying to the event, events want to know what our booth or our table or our actual display is going to look like. The reason why is because they want to create an atmosphere that feels professional enough to really entertain the customers that are walking through. They don't want their customers for their event to come and be like, wow, this is so not put together very well. Everybody looks like they haven't even thought about anything. It looks sort of messy. They want people to come through and be like, wow, I cannot wait to get in and look at all these products and these booths. What an amazing event. So when you think about it that way, How are you and I going to make your booth stand out among all the others in the event? Now, some events can be really big and have thousands of booths, and that's even more of a bit of pressure because you want to really not get lost in the shuffle. And some booths, there actually are some events are going to be more like a couple of hundred, or sometimes you might even be just one of 20 or 30. So depending on what you're doing, obviously you want to stand out more and more. However, I say that even if you're doing a really small event and it's not really like a huge event or like a corporate trade show, maybe it's just a craft market, maybe it's a farmer's market, I say give your best at every event, no matter what, as far as your display. The reason why is because every single customer deserves it. Every single customer deserves to see that you, as a brand, your art brand, is serious about your image and about the branding that you're trying to present to the world. So it doesn't matter what event you do, whether it's a really big event or a really small event, I encourage you to really give it and to really think through how to make your brand really represent at these events. So what do I mean by that? When somebody walks up to your booth, like for example, when they walk up to a Vision City booth when I'm at an event, it's really obvious Vision City is here, I really kind of make it all about black and white. I really have, I have my logo. I have, all of my products really stand out because they are unique in the fact that a lot of them are black and white. I really make a big fuss over my booth design. The reason why is because I want people to stop and come in, or if it's a table, I want them to come up to my table. So I want to encourage that. The first thing I want to talk to you about in this process is to be approachable, okay? Number one thing you want to do is make your booth approachable. And I've gone to a lot of events, okay? And a lot of times the booths that are not getting a lot of traffic are those that are literally, you feel like you're not invited to the booth, if that makes sense. So maybe it's just the attitude and the energy of the people. Maybe it's the fact that the actual booth feels very closed off, so you feel like you can't even look into it. Maybe people the actual design is actually, there's so many things in the way of looking into it that people don't want to come in all the time. And I actually have a story about this. It was the National Women's Show. And I did this event, and I've talked about this event quite a bit because there's so many lessons I learned at this event. Now, when I did this event, I set up my booth the exact same way I had set it up in Los Angeles. Now, I was now in Toronto doing this event, and so I thought, okay, no big difference, right? I'm just going to set up the exact same way. Now, the booth was the exact same size. It was a 10-foot by 10-foot booth. I had a table. I had a clothing rack. I had cards that I was selling because I had not only cards and art prints, but I was selling t-shirts at the time. So I had all my products, same prices pretty much. I had to convert them to Canadian, obviously. Everything was pretty much the exact same that I was selling. I created some packages and stuff for that event, which I'll talk to you about later. But I was, I had success with this booth design before, so I obviously thought, of course, it's going to work this time. However, when I set up the booth, I had all of my art prints on a table at the back of my booth. So if you can imagine with me, and I'll post pictures of this, but people had to kind of walk into the booth. And on the left side, they had t-shirts. On the right side, they had cards. And at the very back, there was bins, and they had all of my art prints. Now, this was the problem. About a couple of hours into the show, and it was a 2-day show, I noticed that the sales were really low for me. And I was like, what is going on? And I remember looking to my left, and there was a jewelry company beside me. And they had set up their booth completely different. They're on a corner, first of all. So by the way, corners cost a lot more. But they're on a corner. So they actually had their booth set up as an L shape with 2 tables on the very corner. So they had their products right up against the corner so people could walk by and look at their products. And it was like their jewelry was right on the edges of their booth. Whereas my products were in the very back of my booth. And so it was like people had to walk into my booth to see them. And I remember I was kind of venting to my husband, what is the deal with this event? Everyone says it's such a great event. What happened? And then the lady beside me, she was much older than me and she'd been doing this a long time. She looked at me and she said, you know what your problem is? And I was like, what? Excuse me? But she said, you know what your problem is? I'm like, no, tell me. She's like, your booth sucks. And I'm like, pardon? Like, I was just in Los Angeles and this booth killed it. Like, what do you mean this booth sucks? She's like, nobody in Toronto is going to walk into your booth. And I'm like, why not? And she's like, because Canadians don't like to walk into booths, apparently. And we kind of had a laugh about it. I was like, I know Canadians can be more conservative. And I'm allowed to say that because I'm Canadian. So all the Canadians watching, don't get mad at me. But I was like, what? What are you trying to tell me? So anyway, we had this big discussion and she talked about her experience at events. And she was saying that the events that she does in Canada, she finds that Canadians don't always want to walk in. And I don't know if it's just people say Canadians are like super polite. We say sorry all the time, stuff like that. And so I was kind of laughing about it, but I'm like, I wonder if this is actually true. Is this like for real? And so while people were walking by, I redesigned my booth. So it took me about 10 minutes. But literally what I did was I put all of my prints on a table at the very front of my booth. So now, like, my booth was a square, but only the front part of it was being like walked by, And I put all of my art prints in bins on the front of my booth. So it was the very edge. So like literally people would be able to touch them as they walked by. Immediately, while I wasn't even finished setting up, people were already there at my booth. It was like they were eyeing my booth but not walking in. And for some reason, among that crowd, they didn't want to walk in. They wanted to just stay on the outskirts and touch things on the outside. And so right when I started to put my art prints on the very outside like line or edge of my booth, I started to get sales. Now, how crazy is that? Okay, that's a really big lesson though, because I literally went from not many sales at all and really like freaking out because I had spent money to get into that event to making thousands of dollars in sales just because I changed my booth. So if you don't think your booth design is very important, you're wrong. And I want to encourage you to listen up because over the next few moments, I'm going to share with you some tips on how to make your booth approachable. Not only approachable, but saleable. You want people to be able to buy things from your booth, not feel overly intimidated, unsure if they even want to walk in. A lot of times, like in LA, people were walking right in, no problem. They would walk in with their dog. Like they were like much more go for it, like aggressive. I'm just going to look at your stuff and I don't care, like out of my way kind of thing. Whereas Toronto, no, they were like, I'm not coming in. And so I had to kind of meet them halfway. So approachability is huge when it comes to your booth. So I want to encourage you to think about that. And let's go on to the next one. The next thing I want to talk to you about is size. Now, the bigger your booth is at an event, the more it's going to cost. So the largest booth size a lot of times that I've seen is 20 feet by 10 feet. I'm sure there's larger sizes as well, but it's basically considered a double wide booth where, a standard booth size is 10 by 10, which is feet. But a lot of times, once a company gets big enough, they can actually afford to fill 20 feet wide by 10 feet deep. So this is only if you're really ready for that, if you have a lot of products. This works really well for fashion brands because then you can bring in racks and actually set up your t-shirts or whatever it is you're selling, your dresses and so forth, in a way that actually feels more like a store. And you can actually have like a cash table and all that. It actually is basically like setting up a portable store. A standard size, like I said before, is 10 by 10 feet. So you can still have a lot of room to play depending on the audience. You may have it set up for people to be able to walk in, where you can actually create an atmosphere as though it's a room. Now, these I find really effective in spaces where, say if you're on a corner of an event, like you're actually at a corner unit, I find this works really effectively because say if you are in a place like Canada or in Toronto where people may not want to walk into your booth, but either way, if you're on a corner, it's a lot less intimidating. So people can kind of poke their head in and then walk out. I encourage you to try that. But I do find that a 10 by 10 is the standard size that you'll be looking at for that. You can also do a half size, which is a 5 by 10. So you're going to have 10 feet wide by 5 feet deep. Now this still allows you to have a wall behind you. You can, in my case at the One of a Kind show, I actually had a wall behind me and then a little half wall because I was on a corner. And so that little half wall became a display wall and I kind of had this nice corner unit that worked really well. But say if you don't have a corner, you can still use the mini sidewalls as places to display your products. Maybe you have price lists, your Instagram handle and social media handles. Maybe you have different signage and so forth to get people's attention as they're walking by. You can also hang things on the sides And then obviously your back wall in general, no matter what kind of space you do have, whether you have a 20 by 10, a 10 by 10, or a 5 by 10, or even just a table, your back wall needs to display your products. You need to actually use the height and the space behind you, behind your table, to really use every ounce of that as real estate to really show what it is you make. So whether you're making shirts or art prints or cards or whatever it might be, I encourage you to use that space because it's real estate where everyone can see it nice and large. Now, when it comes to your logo design for your signage, you can also use that on your back wall or on like within your design or your booth design, but I wouldn't make that the main attraction. I've done that in the past and I kind of regretted it because your main thing you're trying to show is not just your logo, right? You're trying to show your products and get those products out to them as accessible as possible so that they can really see them, pick them up and look at them and actually discover whether or not it's right for them. And so I encourage you to do that. Now, like I said before, your table, if all you have at a booth is a table, you can still make a killing. And the reason why is because you can actually use the tabletop space specifically designed so that it gives you the most effective space. You can always build up onto the table, and which I'll talk to you about in a moment when it comes to display cases and so forth. This works really well if you sell stationery or cards. You can actually build up on the table. You can actually make a customized build. You can buy things. I find it's easier if you actually kind of customize it. I know it's kind of a pain in the butt to find or to actually build things, but I find you get the bigger bang for your buck, and you're also not going to look generic when it comes to your branding. I've seen people use boxes. I've seen people use all kinds of different things to display their products just on the tabletop. And then a lot of times, even if you just have a table, you'll be allowed to have have a wall behind you. So you can maybe put a little bit of products up on the wall, or you can actually use a stand. I've done this many times where I actually use my kind of like a photography stand or a portable backdrop stand, and I like hang some curtains on it, or I hang something or burlap, something to be a backing behind me, even if I'm just setting up a table. I find that if I don't do that, then I'm actually just wasting space. This works really well if you just have a table space. A lot of times your events will allow you to do this. Sometimes they might say your backdrop can only be a certain height. So a lot of times it might be only 8 feet, but you want to use as much space as you possibly can. So ask these kinds of questions. If all you can do is afford to just set up a table at an event, that's great. Just get into the event, especially if it's the right audience for you, and then just ask them, is there any limitation on my backdrop height? I find most of the time it'll be between 8 and 10 feet. 10 is really high, obviously, so I find the higher you can go, the better, because then people can see you from a mile away when they walk into the event. So I would ask that question and push the boundaries and see how much you can actually get with just a table. Oftentimes, they'll just give you a chair and a table, and that's it. So you have to bring everything else, which I will talk to you about more and more in the next sections. But those are generally the sizes you're going to have to choose from. So a table, which is usually 6 feet or 8 feet wide, which is like a fold-out table, or you're going to have a 5 by 10 booth, or you might have a 10 by 10 booth, which is really standard size for a trade show or a craft fair and so on. Or you might be able to graduate to the largest size, which I find in my experience has been 20 feet wide by 10 feet deep. Now, there's also alternatives. Now, what I want to talk to you about briefly is that some events, especially craft fairs, they might even allow you to be portable. So, for example, Renegade Craft Fair, I believe it was, they actually allowed you to have a mobile sort of a cart that you could then apply to actually be moving around throughout the event so that you're kind of mobile. You're not just in one place. So you might even almost be on like a bike or something and have like your art kind of connected and attached. So sometimes, depending on how creative the event is, you might be able to create something completely off the wall and different and do that. So it sounds funny. I've also seen in the past where the events would actually allow you to have just a stand that might be only a few feet wide and then maybe 8 feet tall. So it's almost like you're kind of standing and hanging out beside just a very narrow, tall stand. I've seen this happen before at really large events where they've got all the different sizes of booths, but then they've also got another area that's maybe just like a craft area or an Etsy section or so forth, where they're only allowing you to be kind of like a standing room only. You might be able to have a stool beside it, and that's it. So you don't really get a full table. You might just get a stand. So these are the different options, but I would check your options depending on the event you're going to go to and see what they have to offer. And a lot of times I find nowadays the more modern and very progressive kind of art events, they're really opening their eyes and their mind to selling people space in a different and unique way, not only in the traditional booth way. So ask the question. A lot of times the corporate events might be standard sizes, but you never know until you ask. And you might even say to them, hey, look, I don't think I have enough. I can't afford even a table. Do you have half tables? Can I share a table? And that's another thing. You can always share space. So you can always share a table. You could share a booth. You could share a 5x10 or an 8x10, or sorry, a 10x10. I find that that's really effective too. So you could actually have your friend could be like on one side of the booth, and then your art could be on the other side, and that can be kind of cool. You can kind of do like a bit of a collab in that way. So I encourage you, to check out the booth sizes and see what will work best for you based on the budget you have to spend on each event. When it comes to frames and displays, it really creates an environment when you are actually using a specific form of framing and displaying within your actual booth design. And the challenge that comes up first and foremost when it comes to frames is, well, what if you don't have walls, right? And so a lot of times in order to use frames and to have them, actually displayed around your booth, then you may need to actually create walls. And that sounds like a crazy thing, but it's true. Now, I've done all kinds of things in the past. I've built walls at the One of a Kind show in Toronto. My dad and I actually built some those kind of thin wood board walls where we actually had 2x4 structured as a skeleton, and then we actually nailed on the front. So they were still light enough to carry. They're a little bit heavy actually, but they worked for that event, and we actually set up legit wood walls for that booth. That was really great. And then that way I could actually drill holes and actually put nails in there to hang all my art. So that was fine for that event, but what if you don't have that option? What if you are setting up in a very floated space? So maybe your booth design, or when you arrive to the event, all you're going to get, and by the way, you always want to ask, what is it going to look like when I arrive at the event? Are there going to be walls there? Is it just going to be curtains? Is it going to be just nothing? Are there going to be tents? Do I need to bring my own tent? And so forth. That's actually a really big deal. If you are doing an outdoor event, make sure you ask about tents, because at my first outdoor event I didn't. And I was like hoping and praying that somebody would help me with a tent because I didn't have one. And I found out the night before. And so literally by the grace of God, somebody like hooked me up with a tent, which is incredible. But that's really important to note. Now, say you arrive and you're in a tent, or you're in a space in a large auditorium or indoor, convention space, for example, and you don't have any walls, and you have to think, how am I going to actually hang art on walls that aren't here, right? So you can use things like there's kind of like grid kind of structure walls that are portable. They're kind of like metal grids. That can work. I find that it's a little bit distracting because they're still see-through. You can also do what I've done in the past. I've actually used my backdrop poles as a wall structure. And then what I did is I stretched burlap over top of them, and I actually stringed the burlap together to make it a larger piece. And then that burlap actually became like a portable, thin, like structured wall. Because burlap in itself is so thin, it's light, and so I could actually roll it up when I was done with it. And I've done that in several events, and it works really well. That way I could actually attach my frames, which I always take the glass out of any frames I'm going to use. So if you're buying frames, you don't want to use frames on your display that have glass in it, because obviously for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's reflective, so people are not going to be able to look at your art easily if there's frames or with glass on them. And also it's just heavy, and so whatever you're putting on the wall, you want it to be light so that it doesn't fall down, and you don't want glass flying everywhere, like, big no-no, right? It's the last thing you want. So I'd encourage you to think those kind of things through. How can you actually create walls that are light? And maybe you want to try the burlap idea. You can get burlap at like Home Depot or any home improvement store. You can get a huge roll of it for I think it was like $35 or something like that. But I ended up using that several times. And then I used burlap string to kind of pull it and actually keep it strong and tough, So that's an idea that might help you guys. You can also buy like perforated walls. So you can buy kind of like chipboard or almost like it's like a thick corrugated kind of like a cardboard sort of stock that you can actually find at, again, a home improvement store. But if you find something like that, then it can be really effective too because it's already got holes in it. So you can always put hooks through it. You can put hangers through it in order to hang your products that way. And then that way you can actually move things around depending on what you want. It's kind of like a grid already set up for you. Another thing you can use for walls is it's called foam board. Now foam board, there's foam core, which is only about, let's say it's only about, a quarter of an inch wide. The foam board I'm talking about is actually used for insulation. And so I actually recently, my church actually, we were doing a really big display wall for the back of the stage. It's actually for a stage design. And so we ended up using foam board, which I will actually, while I'm talking about that, I'll put a photo of it so that you can know what I'm talking about. But it's actually made for insulation in walls. So the great thing is it's 8 feet high and 4 feet wide. So it's kind of the perfect size because a lot of times these trade shows, they don't want you to go past 8 feet. So that might be a really great solution. You could always either paint them or cover them with some kind of a covering. I mean, there's a million things you could do to actually make them not look like insulation. But obviously, insulation is so light that you may want to use that. That would work well if you're just hanging paper products on them. For example, you may not want to use frames in that case. You may want to actually clip them. Like in the past, I've actually just hung my pieces on the wall and I actually clipped them with little paper clips on strings or I actually put little nails in the walls and then I just hung the clips holding the art pieces on there. That's another idea that you can use as well. So ways to display your art are really, really important, especially on the walls, okay? The walls are really the highest real estate, I guess you could say. That and the tables that you use, because obviously your walls are what people are going to see when they're walking by. They're going to see them at a glance. They're going to be drawn towards your booth by what you have on your walls. Even if you have to create the walls to put the stuff on it, I would encourage you to do that. You could even, with those insulation walls, you could even cover them in wallpaper. I mean, you can get really creative with that kind of stuff. These are just some ideas that you may want to consider to make it look like you're in a room, even if you only have a half booth, or even if you just have a table. You could have these really cool insulated kind of walls behind you that are wallpapered or that are covered with like a certain paint, maybe even a chalk paint. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff. So I encourage you to be creative. Most importantly, you want all of these things to drive home the message of your brand. So you want everything to work together to really bring home the messages, the overall tone of what it is your brand represents. Now, displays. There's lots of different kind of displays you can do. I find, for example, if you're doing greeting cards and stationery, having displays that are slightly vertical on your tabletops is really, really a given. If everything's flat on a table, people have to look down. When people are looking down, it's harder for them to see things properly because, first of all, there's all this bustle going on around them. But if everything's kind of upright and it's kind of displayed really well for them, they can just kind of glance at it and look at it and go, yeah, I want that and that and that. It's easier for them to shop, okay, if it's on a vertical display. Now I'm going to show some examples of that here because I find sometimes you just want to kind of see them in order to get an idea. Now, the textures of what those displays are going to depend on what is the messaging of your brand. So, for example, are you a very slick, modern brand? You may want all your displays to be maybe white and kind of like a nice shiny satin finish or whatever. Whereas if you're doing something that's a little bit more earthy tones, you may want to use boxes. You may want to use burlap boxes, or you may even want to use wicker. Wicker boxes work really well, kind of like baskets and so forth. You could use those kind of things to display things. As far as to gain height on the tables that you're displaying on. Shelving is also a great way to display things in your booth. So again, it's all about getting things up off of the table alone, but to actually create height within your booth is really, really powerful. Again, it just gets people's eyes up to look around and to really feel like they're in a regular shop, even if you just have a table. So you want to set up height and things for them to look at that are not just looking down at the table in order to feel like they can actually purchase from you. And it just kind of gets their attention as they're walking by. Now, the next thing I want to talk to you about is textures. I kind of touched on this just now, but the textures of your booth really say a lot about your brand. So for me, I actually create black and white art prints, but my black and white art prints are only printed on recycled paper. So I wanted my black and white story, I guess you could say, to be presented still in a way that was not cold, because black and white can come across kind of cold. And I wanted to still have that earthy warmth about it, and so I use burlap. I use wood. I use these kind of earthy textures because I wanted to still bring across the point. This is still an eco-friendly brand. This is not, I'm not just using only regular paper, I'm using recycled paper only. And so I found that that was a great way to bring that across. And then I could use signage and things to bring those messages across within my booth. But I found by using soft, earthy tone textures and colors within my booth, it actually helped to bring that across. Now for you, maybe you're using a vibrant floral wallpaper, and that really brings across the vibe that you're trying to bring in your business. And then you could have your logo on top of that. You can make it really beautiful and feminine if that's what you're all about. Maybe you are all neon, bright neon modern colors, and you want it to be like kind of like pop culture vibe, and you want to go in that direction. It really depends on what it is you're trying to say in order to decide on the colors and the textures you're going to be using in your booth. Now, another thing I want to talk to you about, I've talked about a little bit, is baskets and bins. Baskets and bins come in really handy, especially if you're selling art prints, anything that has to be kind of flipped through. Like I use wood, they're kind of like milk crate baskets, or I guess they're milk crate bins that are made out of wood. I think I bought them at Michael's. I bought them, I think, for maybe like $10 each, but I've used them so many times because they're a perfect size for my prints. So finding something that works with the size of what you're offering, maybe if you offer a larger size, get a larger basket or a bin. But I like it because people can kind of flip through it as if they're looking for a record. And I find I always put those at the very front of my booth because it's a bit less intimidating. People don't necessarily want to talk to me yet. They don't know if they trust me, right? They don't want to make eye contact. But they come out to my booth and they just flip through. And they'll pull something out and be like, yeah, I want this. And it's a bit more like an easier access to the actual products. So if all you have is art on your walls and nothing for people to flip through and touch, I find that that's a miss, because otherwise they have to then come to you and ask you to go into the very back corner and like wrap up their art print. So those are some of the reasons why I personally like baskets and bins, because they're not only a display item, but they're an item of interaction with the customer. You can also use baskets and bins if you are doing, say, sales, and so you have like a sale basket. It's kind of like what women, for example, are familiar with, men too, but I find that people are really familiar with the idea of like a sale bin or a last chance bin, something like that. That can work really well if you have small items or if you're selling prints or stationery booklets and stuff like that. You can actually have them in that bin, and they can still be displayed beautifully, but it's like the bin for sales. That can work really well as well. So I want to encourage you to try using baskets and bins for your own purposes. It also helps to make your booth feel neat and tidy. Everything has its place. It's not flying all over the place, falling off the table. You want things to look organized and clean, so I encourage you to try that. I hope some of these ideas for your booth design have helped you. Now, it's really impossible for me to tell you how to design your booth because your brand is so different. It's got its own style. And I really want you to explore your own options and to really have fun with it. I loved designing my booths, and I still do whenever I do an event, because it's a time to really express what this brand that you're building is all about. And you can really have a lot of fun with it, with colors, with textures, with tables, with displays, with building walls. Like, it's a very hands-on kind of DIY project. So I encourage you to check it out and to actually have a lot of fun with it and to enjoy the process, get some friends involved. I always actually set up my booth at home first because I want to see how it's going to look. Obviously, it may or may not work to do that depending on how much space you have, but I remember doing this in my basement at the time where I was living, where I had some space. It was just an unfinished basement, but I set up my whole booth and I actually walked into it and I was kind of like, how's this feel? Is this working? So you may want to do that, do like a dry run and actually set up your booth. Sure, it might take some extra time, but those that come prepared to trade shows make money, and those that don't. So seriously, I encourage you to always prepare so that you are ready to rock. When you get there, you are like hitting the ground running, okay? So most important thing about this whole section is approachability, okay? Make your booth so welcoming to those people so that they will either come inside or come up to the edges depending on your crowd. Make it like they want to get in line. They want to get into your booth. They want to see what you have to offer. I really encourage you to think about that. Now, in the next section, I'm going to talk to you a lot about product display as well as lighting. And so I want to encourage you to check out the next section, and let's go on and keep moving forward. Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you guys have enjoyed listening in on that clip from the Trade Show Success Guide course. That was one video out of the course. There's lots of videos in that course where I cover a ton of different topics, including lighting, pricing your products, how to really create different packages, how to create contests, and really different ways to interact with people that are in person at live events. I talk about getting insurance for your booth if need be, how to take payments, whether it's with a Square reader or with other devices. And I hope that that's really something that can inspire and help you guys. So that's really what today's podcast was all about, just to really inspire you guys, get the ball rolling, especially for those of you who are just getting started to do trade shows or in-person events. I remember when I was beginning, I was really just drawing in on people that had already been there, people that had already been at these kind of events. I was asking a ton of questions, doing a ton of Google searches on how to really, create solutions for some of the things that I was going to be learning and trying at these events. So I hope that this is just one more way to really help you guys. But for those of you who want to learn more, maybe you're saying, okay, this is awesome. I really like this, but I need more information. I have like 10 other questions. Then I want to encourage you to check out my Trade Show Success Guide course. There's a link underneath this video if you're watching by video, or in the show notes for the audio podcast. And because I'm awesome, I'm going to be giving you guys an amazing discount. I'm going to offer you this course for 50% off. So that's a huge substantial amount. It usually goes for $147 right now, but right now I'm going to offer it to you at a 50% discount. So this is a limited time offer, so if you want it, go get it because it's going to be super, super quick offer. But I want to encourage you guys to check that out. And it's a video series with lots of interaction. And really, I kind of give you kind of tasks to go through. And that way you're really making progress as you're getting ready, as well as a checklist and all kinds of really awesome stuff included in that course. So I hope that's helped you guys. And I hope you've enjoyed today's podcast. Thank you guys so much. And I'll see you next time.